Spencer. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
We have a great guest in studio now, Cheryl Williams, Taxpayer Advocacy Panel Special Projects Chair. A lot of folks, they, especially if you're not self-employed or have your own business, tax time is like once a year, that's the deadlines and things like that. But for many folks, especially small business owners, it's an ongoing thing. You're always crunching numbers and you're always making sure you are all squared away with Uncle Sam. And over the years, taxes have gotten very complicated, let's say. Good morning, Cheryl. How are you?
Good morning. I'm excellent.
Good to have you in here. We've been talking about this for a little bit now, and so it'll be fun to bring you in on this. First, how did you get involved with being a taxpayer advocate for the with the IRS to kind of explain things that are going on? What got you to this point right now?
I actually went online, and they were asking for 75 members. Our panel, Taxpayer Advocacy Panel, is 75 members from around the world, and there's one from each state, and the one from Washington State was coming open. We served 3-year terms, and it was coming open, so I applied, and after an extensive background search and background check and everything, I was eligible, and so this is my second year on the panel.
Wow.
And what were some of the main things that you started to hear as you got out into the public or during your initial trainings that really showed you the need to have an advocate there, a voice at the IRS, some way to go, listen, there was a time, we were just talking about this before we started, there was a time back in the 20s where it was a one sheet. It was, what'd you make? Here's the tax rate. Here's this. There have been talks about going back to kind of postcard-sized forms, but as anybody who has filled out taxes know, it is nowhere close to that right now.
No, it's not. And actually, tax rates weren't even around in the 20s. It was just a 1% flat tax. So it's really changed a lot. What we do at the panel is more of a systemic thing. So we do, of course, we'll listen to individual complaints. Oh, the IRS does this. Oh, the IRS did that. But we do systemic complaints. So, for example, if you're reading the instructions for a form and you're having a problem figuring it out, and you see that a word is spelled wrong, or you see to instead of on, or at instead of or, then that's the job for us. We do that.
And sometimes those little mistakes could have impacts down the road.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why we have an oversight committee like us.
Wow.
To look at that.
When you look at this roadmap, you sent us a link, and we'll put the link to this on this interview when we post it here, an illustration to the modern U.S. tax system, and it looks like you're going through the subway system.
The New York City subway system's less complicated than
Yeah, it's based on a subway system.
It's just like a choose your own adventure almost too. You go here, and then you got we got to make sure you go this way. Oh, if you go this way, then a whole another set of it's like the game of life, and all of a sudden you hit on audit.
Yeah, it follows your journey, really your taxpayer's journey through answers to tax law questions, all the way through audits, appeals, collections, and litigation. It shows what happens at every stage and why it takes so long sometimes. And it just takes a lot of twists and turns. And the road to compliance isn't always easy to navigate.
What are some of the main hang-ups that people have? Now, not every tax return or not every filer is going to have to go through this whole rigmarole, as it were. What are some of the most common ways that people find themselves trying to navigate this? Is it perhaps missing out on a key part of the form? Is it maybe that they didn't file in a timely fashion and so that gets flagged? Or what are some of the things on this?
A lot of people, and this is probably 90% of my work anyway, other tax preparers may have different opinions, but 90% of my work is that people forget that they have this job, or that they did this for 3 months and it's taxable, and then February they file their taxes, and then March they get a 1099 and they're, oh no, I forgot to do this. So some people go ahead and amend their returns, but some people just say, forget it, it was only $10,000. What can it hurt? Well, it does hurt, because the IRS will find you, and it will take 3 or 4 years, and penalties and interest will build up in that time.
Wow.
So anytime that you find that you have missing income, it's best to report it, it's best to amend your return, and it's best to pay up right then so you can avoid those penalties.
So a lot of folks, and I think I get a sense that I know where Spencer's going to go on this with the gig economy and things like this, but a lot of folks, once the first of the year comes around and they get their first sets of W-2s or whatever, they'll file as soon as they can to get either a check back, or if they have to pay, they may hold off a little bit. But once you have filed, even up to and past the deadline, can you amend those? And then how does all that work? At least up to the deadline, you can amend, right?
You can amend up to the deadline without risk of penalties or interest. Of course, it's going to be extra tax, but you can amend up to the deadline. And then after the deadline, it's assessed at certain rates. It's very complicated. There's a whole rate schedule on the website, on the irs.gov website, but I don't have it memorized. But yeah, you can amend without penalty.
Was this, I'm not trying to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I'm not a big fan of the IRS over the years, but is this orchestrated to be complicated? Is it in the government's interest to simplify this? Does the government really want the American taxpayer to have a postcard that says, I made $50,000 and the government took 25 of it? I mean, is it easier for them to look at this in a complicated way so people don't really know what's being taken or what they're giving? Or how did it go from the one page to thousands of pages? I just don't understand why it became so overly complicated and why anybody would want it to be that complicated.
I don't have an answer to that question. I'm sorry. If I did, that would be great. But you're right. How did it go? The question is, how did it go from a one-page form to this horrible thing that we have now? And really, paying taxes should not be that big of a deal. If you are laying awake at night thinking about how am I going to pay this tax bill, or how am I going to do this return, or how am I going to figure this out, that's ridiculous. That's where professionals come in to take some of that alleviate some of that stress. But of course, you have to pay them too. So I honestly don't have an answer to that question.
Back to the 1099 or the W-9 or these other types of forms when it comes to people who pick up side jobs and side gigs. If you're getting one of those forms, the IRS knows. I mean, like you said, they're gonna eventually, it's gonna catch up with you, right?
Correct.
Because the company that paid you or whatever, they have submitted their own tax forms for their
write-offs.
Yeah,
too.
For their own due diligence. So it's going to come to you sooner or later.
It'll come to you sooner or later. And the thing is, with the government shutdown, it still accrues even though they're not coming to you to do that. When the government shut down, IRS agents were laid off, and they didn't have the ability to come to people. So now that they have, the penalties are still accruing.
Are one of the things that you work with, or at least parts of your group work with, on handling and dealing with those types of penalties and how folks can work through them, or is that a whole nother?
That's a legislative issue. That isn't our issue. That's a legislative thing. We're systemic, so we are looking for the thing that affects the most taxpayers.
Yeah. There are lots of things on the IRS's website. We've been posting, they have every so often we'll get notes from them on filing deadlines, or this is your time now to do this, or make sure your withholdings are here. There is a tax withholding estimator that's on the website, and these are important for folks to kind of get a handle on before April 15th comes around, or whatever the deadline is, and you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea this is. Are these pretty accurate if you've got the information? The accuracy is a little better here.
So this new estimator, which is on irs.gov, it's called the Paycheck Checkup. It is awesome. It is incredible. They just released a new version September 4th. So it allows for the computation of tax when you're self-employed. So IRS understands that some taxpayers work solely for W-2 wages. So that means that you work for somebody and you get a W-2 at the end of the year. Some work only for themselves. So they work in construction, they get a 1099, that's all their income. Maybe you have a mixture. Maybe, for example, you work at the hospital, but you have a part-time job selling home goods or cosmetics.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can accurately estimate the correct amount of withholding you'll need from your full-time job to cover your federal tax from your part-time job.
Oh.
And any self-employment tax based on your specific situation, of course. So if you pull up this paycheck checkup on irs.gov, you're going through the estimator, and you'll be able to enter all your income and make sure you check out the credits available to you, especially if you have kids or pay for childcare. So at the end, you'll get a meter when you complete it. Under the meter is how to adjust your results. So if you choose to get your balance owed or refund as close to zero, using your estimates, of course, it'll tell you how to adjust your W-4 at your wage-paying job to do that.
Oh, so that's where you're filling out like 1, 2, or 3 withholders and things like that.
Exactly. So let's say tomorrow I want to change my withholdings because I won a bonus. I got a bonus at work for $10,000 and they didn't take tax out of it. I fill out this thing. It will tell me exactly what to put on my W-4 tomorrow so I can be withheld at the correct rate before the end of the year.
Okay at the end. Wow.
It's really amazing.
We'll put the link to that in the show notes here. We could go on and on. We have the news to get to, though, here at the bottom of the hour, but we'll probably have you on as we move closer throughout the year and before general tax time is upon us. So, Cheryl, thanks for coming on, and we'll get the links on the show notes here so people can see how complicated it is, the illustration of the modern tax system, and get more information there. But good work out there, and I know there's a lot of folks that appreciate people like you who go through these pages of pages of pages to find out what may or may not be accurate there. So
thanks,
thank you.
Spencer. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.